back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. I'm glad to be back with you talking fights. UFC Vegas 39 this Saturday. Unfortunately, though, it is kind of the start of like a 3-week stretch of some kind of mediocre fight nights there. But the UFC treats us with back-to-back pay-per-views here in a couple weeks. We've only got 11 fights this Saturday, but fortunately, it is our girl Mackenzie Dern in her first main event spot, taking on Marina Rodriguez, the classic grappler versus striker. I'm expecting a real fun main event on Saturday. Real small loss last week, kind of been the norm as of late, but go ahead and let you recap that, man.
Yeah, you hit it on the head as far as some lackluster fight nights. I can appreciate that they're still giving us a fight night on the Wilder Fury weekend, but I understand why the UFC is not throwing everything at us right now. Like you said, we did end up negative, minus 0.29 units last week. We hit our biggest bet of the night with our 4-unit hammer on Nico Price. A little bit sketchier than we might have liked, but Nico did do what he needed to do to get that win. Then the Misha Serkinov fight.
Close, man. Maybe the takedown at the very end sold it for Jotko.
Maybe so, and I don't know where Misha's future is, especially at 185. I don't think that it's there. The Joe Selecki pick, again, we thought we had a lean there. Jared Gordon, he won.
Yeah, great round one for Selecki, but yeah, I do think the fight went the right way.
100%. Then the Santos by TKO round one. That's a tough one for everybody. That was our parlay buster as well. We had the under 4.5 in that fight.
Busted everybody's
parlays. Who saw that one coming? Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker ends in decision. That's insane. Then we had Smith wins by TKO. Definitely in that first round, we thought that we made a good bet.
Good spots.
But Malarkey, I think he's real deal. I texted you right after it, and it's like he's earned our respect. He's got a chin. He's making improvements, and I won't doubt him in the future. Then the Andrade versus Perello under 2.5 rounds. That one hit with ease. That was a great fight. Definitely glad we hopped on that at plus money for sure.
Should have hit it harder.
Maybe should have hit it harder, but regardless, I'm glad we hit that. Then the Andrade wins by submission plus 2,000. It didn't hit, had to. That was an insane price to get him at. And honestly, I wish we could have cashed on that, but like you said, happy that we hit it. Before we go down this fight card, make sure you give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Before we get started, we'll go over a couple of the bets that we've already released on Twitter. We start off by backing our girl Mackenzie Dern in the main event. We got her at minus 155 for 1.5 units. We also hit the Mackenzie Dern submission in round one. Yeah. We really see that is a possibility. But if it doesn't happen, we have kind of, slight hedge by getting the fight doesn't start round 4. If she can't find her way to the mat, there's obviously a chance that Marina touches her up just like she did Amanda Ribas. Right. And we definitely don't see this fight going to the judges. Lastly, we have a parlay put together where we have Alexandr Romanov and Matheus Nicolau both to win. It puts it at around even money, and we've got 1.5 units on that as well. Pretty confident in both those picks.
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and start on the main card. We start in the lightweight division where we see Steve Garcia taking on Charlie Ontiveros, who's 11-7, and to be honest with you, not UFC caliber. Right. He's getting beat on the regional scene by 1-0 fighters in Fury FC, and it just kind of seems like the UFC is doing him a favor by taking that Holland fight on short notice. Yeah. He almost got killed in that Holland fight, man. I honestly thought that his back was broken when he was scary. Yeah, it was scary. I know that there was you could hear a pin drop in that arena whenever that happened.
Turns out he was okay, though.
Yeah, it turned out he was okay and taking pictures afterwards. Right. So that's all good. His opponent, Steve Garcia, he's coming out of a solid gym in Jackson Wink. And he is 0-1 in the UFC with his loss coming to Luis Pena. But he has had some quality wins outside of the UFC. He had a win over Jose Maricel in LFA coming into this fight. And he has a win over our boy, Ronnie Lawrence. Those are both, way better than Charlie Ontiveros, in my opinion. I think it's pretty clear cut that this is Charlie's last chance to prove that he is UFC caliber, but I don't see it working out for him. I will admit that Steve Garcia has had problems in the past with those longer, lankier guys. I just don't think that this will be a problem for him. I'm actually looking at taking Garcia inside the distance. I'm curious to see how you're seeing this.
So the most interesting thing about this fight to me is is the weight difference. The fact that you saw, I know he's typically a 170er, but fighting at 185 last time, typically a 170. You know, you look at Steve Garcia, whose majority of his career is at featherweight, and even at Dana White Contender Series, he missed weight trying to fight at bantamweight. So, you know, it's a big weight difference here. To see Steve Garcia as a minus 300 favorite, right off the bat's a little worrisome for me. But you're right, man. Charlie Ontiveros losing to just downright cans, except MVP and Jeff Neal, of course. But he's also just only wins he have are complete cans. And, you know, I don't really want to question his heart or his durability. But, you know, the Kevin Holland one, you're right. You know, it was taking pictures and stuff afterwards. And you look down, he's got some doctor stoppages, some rib injuries. And I showed you the one where he's pulling arm bar and the guy kind of, you know, stomps on his head and he milks it a little bit, man. So, like I said, he's in the UFC. I'm not. I don't ever want to question it. But sometimes I do think Charlie looks for a way out of there. On the side of Steve Garcia, you talked about being at Jackson Wink, works a lot with Danab Batchery, and Edwin Cooper Jr., who was the Iowa wrestler I sent you about that fights in LFA, who I think is going to be a phenomenal prospect. The best win over Ronnie Lawrence, you're right. It's his best one. But man, that's a bantamweight in Ronnie Lawrence, and now he's fighting a welterweight in Charlie Ontiveros, and even when he's coming up short to Alon Cruz, featherweight, Joe Warren featherweight, Ricky Tercios bantamweight, I could definitely see him struggling with the size of Charlie Ontiveros. So as I got into it, I almost don't even want to put Steve Garcia in anything because he's almost just as unproven to me. It's an extremely low level fight, but I do think that it ends inside the distance. So I've actually looked at parlay and maybe doesn't go the distance with maybe a money line later on in the card that I like.
Yeah, I don't hate that. You're right. It's not going to see the judges,
right.
But it is something to note that Ontiveros coming down to 155 and showing those chin problems in the past.
Oh yeah,
I can't imagine that helping him out any. And Steve Garcia throws some power in his punches, and although he is the smaller guy coming into this, Ontiveros doesn't like getting hit. Like you said, he's a little bit of a quitter. So I can see, like I said, I see this going Garcia inside the distance, but you're probably right. The safer play is the fight doesn't go the distance because Ontiveros is long enough and Garcia has shown those holes against those longer fighters in the past.
Love to have action on that first fight, so we might end up doing something with
Probably
that.
so. Our next fight takes place in the featherweight division where we see Charles Rosa, who's 14-5, taking on Damon Jackson, who's 18-4-1. Rosa's coming off that split decision to the guitar hero Justin James, and that tells me all I need to know, man. I mean, he comes out of a great gym and American Top Team, but this dude's inconsistent as can be.
Oh, yeah.
I know you're one to about the patterns, about the superstitions. He is back and forth with wins and losses, and judging by this one, he's going to catch an L right here, man. Damon Jackson, you know, he's training out of Fortis MMA. He's coming off getting steamrolled by Elliott Topuria in just the worst way possible.
Pleasure to watch this week.
Exactly. He's only a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he's got some really, really slick submissions, and he gets them from some weird angles. Honestly, just by their belts, Rosa does have the grappling edge with his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but we've seen him worked on the ground, especially when he doesn't have that size or strength advantage. And I think that that's something that we could see here. It's definitely what the odds makers see, and I do lean with them in saying that Jackson is the favorite here. I just don't think that I want to pay that price. So I think ultimately I'm going to lay off, but I will be picking Damon Jackson. I think Charles Rosa is a little bit in over his head, and I would be lying if I didn't say that the Justin James split is really weighing heavy on my decision about this fight.
I was about to say there's no way you're laying this much juice on Damon Jackson now, man. With Charles Rosa, you're right. He spent a lot of time in American Top Team, but he switched over to Sanford MMA, which you've seen a whole lot of bodies go there to get some work in recently. And it's really these last like 3 or 4 fights since returning from his injury that you can just draw a whole lot from, and not really got a whole lot to see because a lot of time he spent on his back, like you talked about, getting dominated. But you know, his hands, I think they're a little bit sharper than Damon Jackson. You've seen that he can outbox Kevin Aguilar, who is a guy who particularly relies on his boxing to have success. And even while on his back, man, he's shown like ridiculous submission defense at times, you know. And when you look at all these submissions Damon Jackson has, I think it's some of like, what they maybe call wiki capping, just looking at the records and stuff. And maybe I think that's why Damon Jackson has gotten steamed so much, is seeing all those submissions and see Charles Rosa dominate on the mat. But dude, Derek Minner, as long as his gas tank can hold up, he can grapple, man. He's out there doing it with Darren Elkins and stuff. And we don't have to talk about how good of a grappler Bryce Mitchell is. You talked about Damon Jackson's purple belt. I'm hesitant to think Damon Jackson can replicate that, one bit, if I'm going to be honest with you. And originally, Charles Rosa opens as the minus 180 favorite, and Damon's the plus 155 dog. Now it's complete opposite. You see Damon as the minus 180. And so if you take a stab on Charles Rosa to keep the bookies honest, I don't even hate that. With Damon Jackson, Charles Rosa is not going to be the one to do it by no means, but Damon Jackson has been on the receiving end of 2 nasty KOs, and potentially going forward, if we get to cap him again against a power puncher, man, I don't think Damon Jackson's chin is all that great, if I'm going to be honest with you. I'm real curious in this fight because I think it's much closer than a pick'em. These line movements kind of got me all sketched out. I don't think Charles Rosa is like one of my most confident dogs of the night, but I do see some value on Charles Rosa. But, man, I'm probably going to pass altogether.
Yeah, it's just tough for me to get behind Rosa. You look at his wins in the UFC, his last 2 being splits to guys who are 0-4 in the UFC,
right.
No longer with the promotion, or at least I can't imagine Justin James getting the call back. And then Manny Bermudez, another one who's not in the UFC anymore. To me, Derek Minner isn't that good of a fighter, and if you're getting worked by him, you'll get worked by the majority of the division. Like I said, I'm with the odds makers in the fact that Jackson is the favorite, but sure, I'm with you. Sure as hell not laying that juice on him.
Yeah, we'll pass altogether, man. Mm-hmm. Next up is the first leg of our parlay, where we see Alexandr Romanov, who's 14-0, taking on Jared Vanderaa, who's 12-5. We're in the heavyweight division here, and I think the UFC's learned a little bit from putting these low-level heavyweight fights up on the main card. Sometimes they're just Curtis Blades, Rosenstruik, some boring grappling fest, But I think we can agree, man, making a mistake here, putting Romanov a little bit lower on the card here. With him, before last fight, he was on the cusp of being put in there with, the Spivaks, Aspinalls, Dawkins of, the new wave coming into the division. And after that stun he pulled in that last fight with Espino, I know a lot of people have kind of lost a little bit of respect for him.
Took those Aljo Sterling notes.
Yeah, man. The groin shot he took, soft, man, and very milked. But, man, Romanov, not only did that happen, but we kind of saw, our biggest fear for him come true. We saw him have to, defensively wrestle and get extended. It didn't look good. He started slowing down bad, where Jared Vanderaa, he surprised everyone for the good last time out. Everyone thought he was going to go out there, and if he was going to have success, it was going to be wrestling Tafa. And he goes out there, uses his size, his length, puts up over 300 strikes, and just outboxes the guy. Maybe he fell in love with his hands a little bit. I hope so. I really like Romanov to get this fight to the mat early and mimic Spivak's performance and put this guy away. How about yourself?
Yes, that's what should happen, man. I am a little bit salty about Romanov right now. He did cause me to lose that week's challenge. If you remember, that was the challenge.
That was so funny.
But try to look past that. Romanov's a fucking monster, man. I mean, he's literally one of the most terrifying guys in the division with his explosive wrestling and ground and pound for about 7 minutes, man. He really does have cardio issues, and what Vanderaa showed us last time is that he's addressed his cardio problems, right. And if you can put up 300 strikes in a heavyweight fight, you're doing okay, One other thing that I don't necessarily love about Romanov, he doesn't get hit well, man. He does not act as the nail well at all. Mm-hmm. We saw that in the Espino fight, but I will kind of hold off a little bit. Trying to compare Espino and Vanderaa, it's a little laughable, man. Oh, yeah, they're completely different levels. But if Vanderaa can withstand that initial barrage from Romanov, it could get a whole lot sketchier than this minus 600 that we're seeing Romanov sitting at right now. One fight that really gave me confidence in Romanov is that Sergey Spivak fight. Romanov's just a bigger Spivak. He's just a bigger, better wrestling Spivak while he's still got cardio.
Moldovan too, I believe.
Yeah, I mean he's an absolute monster, and like we said, it should happen this way, but we have been screwed on some low level heavyweights in the past, so there is a little worry in that. But we did get Romanov at minus 400 in our parlay. We didn't have to take him at this minus 600, minus 650s that we're seeing now. So I like him. He should win. But it wouldn't be the most surprising thing if Vanderaa outlasted him and made this a little bit closer than we were anticipating.
I remember in an interview Vanderaa had after his loss to Spivak, he was like openly talking like how his coaches were like, hey, you don't have a get-up game. You don't have a bottom game. And it was very evident. And, what was that? Less than a year ago, earlier this year, not even 7 months ago, something like that. The strides aren't going to be made that if he ends up on bottom to get out from underneath Romanov. Whereas Espino, he's got the credentialed championship level wrestling to where he could. He was able to make Romanov wrestle a whole bunch, give him a bunch of resistance, and eat at that gas tank. Where Vanderaa, man, he called out Spivak when he won on the Contender Series. He wanted that fight. He thought that fight was good for him, and it did not go his way from the moment it started. I expect Romanov to get him down early and hopefully get this done inside the distance and not make it sketch on us.
Something to look at, which if playing Romanov at minus 600 is too juicy, you can get him by round one finish at plus money right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that might be worth a stab.
Yeah, if you're not into laying the juice in a parlay, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, that's definitely his best opportunity to get that finish. So.
Absolutely.
So as we're breaking this fight card down, the Jamie Pickett versus Loreno Starpoli fight just got removed because of COVID protocols. That was actually our casual cap challenge, so we're going to make an impromptu shift to a different fight later on in the card. We do move on to the undercard main event where we see Chris Gutierrez, who's 16-3-2, taking on Felipe Colares, who's 10-2. I'm going to be completely honest with you, and I think that there is a lot of recency bias going on in the general public's view on this fight. I've seen a lot of people that are the most confident they've ever been on a fighter on Chris Gutierrez this weekend, and I just don't see where it's coming from. Surely it's not coming from Andre Ewell, who we know isn't that great of a fighter, just coming off of his loss over Julio Arce. Surely it's not the draw from Cody Durden or the win over Vince Morales. He's splitting with Geraldo de Freitas and then beating guys like Ryan McDonald, who's fighting in the art of scrap now. I don't think that Chris Gutierrez has given anybody any reason why he should be a minus 300, although I understand that Felipe Colares is not that great of a fighter. Felipe Colares did surprise both of us last time, where I know we bet Luke Saunders, hoping that we could finally back a Tennessee boy, and it did not happen, man. Luke Saunders...
Like 0-3 doing that.
Yeah. Luke Saunders did not produce for us at all. Gutierrez, he has insane leg kicks, which will probably be a factor in this fight, as Colares does have a heavy Muay Thai stance and leaves that front leg out there. But I do think that Gutierrez's takedown defense is something that could be exploited here. Colares does have decent entries in his wrestling, and he was able to get Geraldo de Freitas down a couple of times, and he looked good doing it. If this fight winds up on the mat and Gutierrez can't find his way back to the feet, I could see this really busting up a lot of parlays here, which is why I'm personally laying off of Gutierrez, and I'm happy the podcast did as well.
So I agree and I disagree. I do think I see where you're coming from. The line is extremely, extremely wide, but I do think Chris is the side, and I won't be surprised if he does walk away with it pretty easily. Coming out of Factory X Muay Thai, he trains with some really, really good guys, and just now approaching 30 years old. This guy's got a ton of experience in the World Series of Fighting and LFA. He's got wins over Ray Rodriguez, Aaron Phillips, Jimmy Flick, Timur Valiev, who are all on the UFC roster before Flick retired. But you can't talk about the best calf kicks in the UFC without mentioning Chris Gutierrez after that Vince Morales fight, and it's going to be hard to ever. After that performance, it's going to be hard to get a good line on Chris, I feel like, because it was just such a standout performance for him. And, you finishing someone with leg kicks is always going to stand out. The draw with Cody Durden. Cody Durden's a phenomenal wrestler, for one. I don't think Felipe is on that level and able to shoot out in open space and stuff and be able to get Chris down. But at the same time, got a little bone to pick with that fight, too, Every single judge gives Cody Durden a 10-8. For basically nothing but back control. No damage, back control. And then we lose a Joe Selecki bet last week where he basically has back control for 4 minutes in round one, the same way Cody Durden did, and no judge gives it a 10-8. Little little salty, but it's just another example of the discrepancy in judging that we have all across, the UFC. With Felipe at range, man, I do think that he's playing with fire with Chris Gutierrez. I think those legs are going to get chopped up, and I think when he tries to close space, Chris's hands are going to be a whole lot faster. And when he enters any of those takedowns, Chris hit Andre Ewell with a knee right up the middle very early and discouraged a lot of Ewell's takedowns after that. You could just see it on him. And I know Felipe is probably his path to victory here is to grapple, but you see De Freitas landing 6 takedowns on him, Montel Jackson landing 11. You see him tiring out, and Pilarte landing 2 or 3 there in the third round. And man, Luke Saunders, he just retired from MMA, I think. Beating Luke Saunders in 2021 when the guy's like 36 years old. I know we backed him. Honestly, looking back, could have been a bad play by us, but I just don't put a lot of stock in gutting a performance out against Luke Sanders. He literally lands a takedown late in round 3 that seals the deal on that, and I think Chris Gutierrez is levels above what Luke Sanders is right now. I'm okay with this laying off. I don't see it as comfortably of a victory as some people do, but yeah, I think Chris is going to walk away with the victory on Saturday.
And I might be looking too much into it, but Colares having a loss to Geraldo De Freitas and Chris splitting with Geraldo.
The shows are pretty close in level.
Right, which is kind of why I'm like, this line is a little bit wide. Even Montel Jackson, I think that Montel Jackson gets lined pretty damn close to Chris Gutierrez here. It's I think it's a whole lot closer than the odds like to show, and I'm not nearly as confident as most people are in Chris here. I know
Felipe is like a plus 250 right now, but I guarantee he does not win round 1 against Chris, and I bet you get plus 500, plus 600 after round 2, and he's gutted his last few wins out in the last 2 rounds. So if you're gonna bet Felipe, I bet you get a damn good line live.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all, actually. Yeah.
Kicking off the main card, we're in the middleweight division where we see Phil Hawes, who's 11-2, taking on Deron Winn, who's 7-2. Phil Hawes is now operating out of Sanford MMA, which I feel like is such a great move for that guy with his style of fight and all the wrestling. He's got a body of grapplers there versus where he was at Jackson Wink. Man, it's Holly Holm and John Jones and stuff. It's point fighting, and that is not his style whatsoever.
John Jones is a wrestler, whatever. Okay.
Phil Hawes, I feel like his career has just kind of been rushed, I guess you could say. At 3 fights in, he's on Ultimate Fighter, and he's having to fight Andrew Sanchez, who happens to be a collegiate national champion himself. And then Luis Taylor and who is he fighting on the Contender Series there? When he gets his head kicked, head kicked off.
Julian
Marquez. It's just like he's 6-7 fights into his career when he's having to fight these kind of guys, and I think now we're finally maybe starting to see him come into his own, and he's making those improvements in the cardio, which was always our biggest concern for him. Where Deron Winn, crazy to look at that guy and think that he might not make weight on Saturday, The last one at 195 pounds with Arroyo, and he really surprised a whole lot of people. He's at all the disadvantages that you could be at, and he finally showed off that wrestling that DC just always talks about. He talks about him, he wrestles with Islam and Andrew Sanchez and DC and all the guys that Islam's, I'm sure, bringing over there. Look, I think Phil Hawes is a pretty comfortable pick here. I think he's got the wrestling background to keep Deron Winn off of him, and I think he's a better fighter.
Yeah, so I'm with you in that Phil Hawes is kind of proven as UFC caliber at this point. I definitely had my doubts after that Contender Series loss, but like you said, he's kind of fought through adversity and overcome those cardio issues, which was my biggest knock on him. Winn, like you said, coming off that massive upset, I did call that one. I knew Arroyo was a hype job, and it turns out that the UFC has now cut him,
packed him up, sent him on the way,
so he can Winn, he really relies on his wrestling to find success, which, like you said, is going to be very, very difficult against a JUCO national champion Phil Hawes. And Hawes is going to have a 7-inch reach advantage here. He's going to be the more powerful fighter, the bigger fighter, the faster fighter. And I don't think that there's very many paths to victory for Winn. But it is tough to want to lay, that minus, what are we at?
200 something at least.
270 maybe.
Phil Hawes is looking at...
minus 300.
Minus 300.
Yeah, so it's really tough to want to lay minus 300s when we know in his last 2 fights, he's getting rocked. He's getting
There's
absolutely
some times
rocked.
where he's on chicken legs.
Yes, and it's, he doesn't have the greatest head movement. Like I said, he's proven that he can fight through that adversity and stick to his game plan to grind out those wins. But it's not something where I'm willing to lay 3-1 odds on somebody that could get upset again, just like he's shown in the past.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. With Phil Hawes, that's something I noted that doesn't really wear a punch well. It's not that he's getting knocked out by no means, but his legs get a little wobbly, and he's got the hands out reaching for the clinch. But one thing both of these guys have in their favor, Phil Hawes just got through fighting Amavov and Dawkins, two tall, can be rangy strikers, where Deron Winn, he's coming off a Jared Mearshart and Arroyo, 6'3" guys. So both of them are finally getting someone that you're not having to close a massive amount of distance to get their game going. I favor Hawes pretty heavily here. But I told you, I think there's a real broken line in this fight. Deron Winn, dude, this guy is not finishing Tom Lawler, Eric Spicely. He doesn't seem to be able to. For one, his boxing is not that good. And when he gets in on space, he doesn't seem to have a bunch of power by no means, I don't necessarily see him finishing Hawes. If he, Deron Winn is a product of how much he can get his wrestling going. And if he can get it going, he's going to win a decision. That's sitting at plus 450, 18% implied odds. It's like, if Deron Winn, if he does win this fight, I absolutely think it's by decision, and that's probably somewhere about a 30% odds. If you're going to bet Deron Winn, I think you take the plus 450, and I think that's his best path to victory there, but all day on the Phil Hall side. I'm glad we both see it that way.
We move on to the women's flyweight division, where we see Sabina Mazo, who's 9-2, taking on Mariya Agapova, who's also 9-2. This is our violence bet of the night.
It is, man.
Agapova, she's a spectacular fighter in that first round, with 6 of her last 8 wins coming by first round finish. And she's actually coming off one of the biggest upset losses in modern UFC history, with her loss against Shayna Dobson. It was tough to see, and you kind of saw that she's similar.
Her body quit on her.
Her body quit on her. She's a fast starter and does not know how to pace herself whatsoever. That being said, she's only 24 years old, and the fact that she's getting some training in with girls like Jillian Robertson, getting some work in at MMA Masters, those are some really good people to be working with when you have so much raw talent like Agapova has. Not nearly to the same extent as the Agapova loss, but Mazo is actually coming off of an upset loss herself against Alexis Davis. That was up a weight class, so I do think that probably played a factor in why Mazo couldn't get it to the ground where she usually finds success in her fighting. In this fight, I know that we're playing the under on it. I think that the finishing upside early is definitely on Agapova's side. I wouldn't be surprised at all, though, if we saw a similar sequence as Agapova's last fight in Shayna Dobson, as Mazo is a much better fighter than Shayna Dobson and can and has shown that she can go 3 rounds. Another thing I'd like to note is that Mazo is returning back to flyweight, which is her normal weight class, and I think that she could have some success. She's a big girl herself, and I think that this fight will be a close one, but I can't see it going to the judges, and the fact that we can get it at plus money, I love that we played that, man.
Absolutely, man. I'm on the side of it as well. I think this hits with ease. With Agapova, big comparison for me to Michelle Pereira. He comes in there, gets that awesome debut round 1 finish, just like she did over Hannah Cyphers, and next fight out, freaking theatrical performance before you step in the cage. During the introduction, she's pacing back and forth, head bobbling, and damn near wasted half her cardio before the fight starts. And at the end of round 1, you could see this girl was absolutely gassed. She's throwing cartwheels like Michelle Pereira, trying to pass guard. And just very immature, and you could tell she's very young in her fighting career. But man, don't be mad at her for for busting parlays. Be mad at yourself for betting her as a minus 1,500, 2 fights in the UFC. Women's MMA, not named Valentina Shevchenko. That is just that's
on you as a bettor.
Yeah, for sure. I think Agapova, especially early, offers the style to beat Mazo, similar to Alexis Davis. She's going to push her forward. She's going to have a ton of forward pressure in the apex cage. Sabina's not going to be able to keep that distance the way she likes, and she's got nasty ground and pound that opens up a lot of those submissions once Agapova does find her way on top. With Sabina Mazo, she's actually working a whole lot with Mackenzie Dern this camp, so I think she, she saw her holes in her ground game last time, and she is hoping to improve on them. She's just as young, I think she's only 23 or 24 herself. And I think coming back to flyweight is definitely her natural weight class. As bantamweight, Alexis Davis was able to, man, there was zero resistance on those takedowns. They were some of the easiest takedowns I've ever seen someone get, and seeing that, I do think, especially early, Agapova is going to be able to replicate some of that. But if she, is able to survive that, I don't think Agapova has the gas tank to be able to go the full 15, and Mazo is going to be able to find that finish in round 2 or 3 the same way Dobson did.
Great matchmaking here.
Yeah.
I think the UFC is trying to see which one of these two are the better prospects to kind of push behind, and what a great time to do it, especially both of them coming off of losses. They both have something to prove here.
Seeing Agapova's last performance, I honestly did not even think we'd get plus money on the fight and going the distance. It's pretty crazy, and I love our bet there.
Same.
Moving on, we're in the men's flyweight division where we see Tim Elliott, who's 17-11-1, taking on Matheus Nicolau, who's 16-2-1. I've always said Tim Elliott's kind of like a poor man's Dominic Cruz, maybe even mix of Colby Covington in there a little bit. He's got that awkward footwork style, but unlike Dominic Cruz to set up the strikes, he uses it to set up some unorthodox takedown entries, and he's sitting at a 48% takedown accuracy, which is not very good, but it's the ability to chain those attempts together to eventually get his opponents down to the mat that I like. And he's got a great pace that he puts forth, but man, I think Tim is starting to approach the tail end of his career. He's kind of always been that top 15 guy. He's kind of had to fight his way back already, and I think a couple more fights, and this guy's probably going to call it quits. On the side of Matheus, similar. He's kind of had to fight his way back. He got released once the UFC was kind of releasing flyweights when they didn't know the division was going to be around, and went over and fought some pretty decent competition before getting his way back. A 10-3 guy, a 13-4 Felipe Efrain, who was the same guy Tim Elliott beat for the Titan FC flyweight belt. So he's fighting really good guys, and you combine that with the signing of his smoking girlfriend on the Contender Series. It's absolute perfect time to sign this guy back. And in the first fight, I hate to put my own narrative and spin into betting, but he's coming off a 1.5-year layoff, and he's fighting a fellow counter striker in Manel Cape. That's why the fight wasn't that real exciting. Tim Elliott's going to be coming forward. Matheus' counterboxing is going to be on display, and I think he's got the submission threat to cause Elliott some harm on the mat. Matheus finishes out our parlay with Alexandr Romanov, and super confident on Matheus here, man.
Yeah, man. The more we talk about Matheus, the more I'm wishing that we would have just hit 3 units, minus 190, and just called it a day. I'll start off by saying I'm actually a fan of Tim Elliott's fight style. I think his skill set and style is solid, and it's fun to watch. But I do feel like he's at a point in his career where he's just plateaued. You talked about him. I know he's on a 2-fight win streak, but you're right. He probably is rounding out his career right now, and I don't see much upside. I think he's 34 years old now. Yeah, 34 years old now. I can't imagine him really getting making a run to the title or anything like that. He often relies on his durability and his pressure to overwhelm his opponent, but I believe he'll fall short against the much more technical fighter in Nicolau. Nicolau's defense is so good, it does make fights boring, He's very, very strong in his grappling exchanges and as a black belt on the mat. And like you said, he stood up with our boy Manel Cape and outclassed him. At the end of the day, we were wrong on that pick, and I don't think that Nicolau should have ever been a underdog to him. Elliott being only a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I could see where he's going to struggle to find success when it does get to the mat, if it does get to the mat. And I'm happy we parlayed Nicolau. Like I said, the more we talk about it, the more I don't see very many paths to victory for Elliott at all, just because I think he's outclassed technically on the feet. He's definitely at a disadvantage whenever it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I don't think that he's going to be able to get in on the hips of Nicolau in this fight at all.
Don't disagree with anything you said, and I don't know if there's any more I can add, man. I'm glad we're on the same side and found a way that we could parlay Nicolau.
We move on to the co-main event of the night and the casual cap challenge for us. It takes place in the 170-pound division where we see Randy Brown, who's 13-7, taking on Jared Night Train Gooden, who's 18-6. Kind of insane that this is our co-main event, man. If I'm being completely honest, this is prelim level type fight right here. I wasn't able to find it on his Instagram, but apparently Randy Brown has been training with guys like Marvin Vettori, Kelvin Gastelum, and I know that he's been getting his workouts with our boy Gregor Gillespie, which I know is pushing him to the fullest extent. We've seen some of his workouts.
Do a quarter of that workout.
Yeah, that dude's insane. Randy Brown is very long, slick submission game, which we've seen in his last 2 wins over Alex Oliveira and Warley Alves. And also he has a solid stand-up game whenever he's given that room to kind of find his rhythm. He has great calf kicks, the good double jab, and then the speed and athleticism to boot. Gooden, on the other hand, is someone who I've kind of tried to fade every single time he's been in the fought in the UFC, and it's finally got the best of me in that last fight where he got that career-saving KO over Nicholas Stoltz. I'm not saying that Gooden's an awful fighter by any means, but he is one of those guys that needs that KO shot to win, and he utilizes his durability so that he can find that range. Being one of those shorter, stockier guys in the division, he does kind of remind me of like Mike Perry. Eats a lot of shots, but damn it, he's one shot away from changing somebody's night. And to me, Randy Brown hasn't really shown to have the best chin. There's times where I've seen where I can't lay the price at a 2-to-1 price on Randy Brown here. I'm picking Gooden right here. I do think that he has a solid chance to get the KO, and he's also kind of my underdog pick of the night. I don't think that there's many dogs barking on this card, but if there is one that I see winning, I think that Jared Gooden has a pretty damn good shot. One more angle on this fight that I like is I do kind of oddly enough see this one going to the judges, and if it does, that being said, I like the over 1.5 sitting at -160. I think that there'll be a feeling out process, and if Jared Gooden does find that range, it'll be kind of in that those later rounds when Randy Brown starts becoming a little bit lazy and leaving those openings up for him.
So I've kind of always been on the opposite side of you, as kind of make a case for Jared Gooden the first 2 fights into the UFC, you know? But yeah, I'm going to be on the opposite side on this one here with Randy Brown. But with Jared Gooden, you talked about how is this our main event? Like, what a knockout can do for your career. You know, basically he's 0-2, but he's taking on veterans Alan Jouban and Abubakar. It's like those are hard fights, but stepping on Nicholas Stoltz like he did, career saving, so smart of him too. You know, UFC's not going to cut you when you step up and save a fight on the main card. Right. You know, and Stoltz was far less caliber than Jouban and Abubakar. It was perfect opportunity for Jared, and awesome. You know, I'm extremely happy for the guys. He's a good friend to some other UFC podcasts and stuff out there. But I'm afraid, man, in this one, I think he's a little bit, I guess you say, one-dimensional, has to land that right hand. But he's done it in 14 of his 18 wins, So he's absolute finisher. And when you look online, Jared looks to be taking fighting way more serious these days. He's working with Phil Rowe. He's going down to Fusion XL. And if he's watched Randy Brown's last couple fights with Luque and Cowboy Oliveira, that calf kick is 100% needs to be in the game plan. Randy Brown, I think he's just a sharper, more technical, more polished of the two. You know, you talked about the size and length and athleticism this guy has. He's very technical in his approach when he's able to have that space. His jab is so long. He'll fire nasty body kicks at you. And that right hand, man, the way he landed it on Cowboy, it closes distance quickly and closes a lot of distance. You talked about that slick submission game. I think he's going to have not just a submission and jiu-jitsu advantage. I think Randy Brown's going to have a significant wrestling advantage here. And if he needs to, I think he'll be able to take Gooden down. But
especially the fact that he's working on that wrestling game with Marvin Vettori and Gastelum.
It could be, and that could be something that he's working with them to incorporate that in the game plan, you know. But yeah, man, make no mistake about it. We've seen Randy Brown, you know, KO from Nico off his back and stuff. Shots that are going to have far less power than Jared Gooden's right hand. And honestly, talk about it in a second. I think, you know, it would be prelims on a lot of other fights, but on this, I think it has co-main written on it for a reason on this one, and I expect some fireworks here.
I'll say one other thing that kind of makes me happy to back Gooden here. He's never been submitted in his career, and he actually himself, he's got a mixed bags of submissions. He's got 7 submissions on his record, 8 knockouts. he's well-rounded as well, and considering the fact that he hasn't shown those holes in his ground game, I'm thinking that he will be able to keep this on the feet unless Randy Brown has made those huge improvements in his wrestling and can get this to the mat on his own terms.
I was watching the Oliveira fight this week, and I know Oliveira has fought at 155 in the past, but Randy Brown, he is a massive welterweight. Massive. Good co-main event. Happy to take the favor here on the casual cap. Hopefully I can get back on track, and we'll see what happens on Saturday. The main event of the evening is in the women's strawweight division, where we see Marina Rodriguez, who's 14-1-2, taking on Mackenzie Dern, who's 11-1. Marina Rodriguez repped off 2 good wins in a row there. Big pay-per-view win over Amanda Ribas, and then good veteran that she just beat there, Michelle Watterson, but that was up at 125 pounds. We got to see her go 5 rounds, but whenever we've seen this girl make that weight cut to 115 pounds, I do think it takes a significant cut on her cardio, especially against heavy grapplers. She does have the Muay Thai background heavily in her favor. She's got the level of competition heavily in her favor as well. But, man, this girl has just not shown nothing off her back whatsoever. When a fighter is resulting to striking off her back, similar to Conor and Khabib or something, that's when you know you can't get up, and we've seen that numerous times with Marina Rodriguez. And luckily, Mackenzie Dern, man, she knows a thing or two on the mat. You know, it is her first main event spot, and it is her first time going 5 rounds, and 4 of her 5 UFC wins have come in the first round. So it's a little bit worrisome, but also we got plus 650 on that first round sub, which is how all 4 of those 5 wins have happened. So I love that. She's sharpening the hands with Jason Perillo, although watching that Vanderaa fight doesn't really look the smoothest of hands. It's all kind of to close distance, but that's 2 grapplers, and oftentimes when you see 2 grapplers fight, similar to how Phil Hawes and Deron Winn are, oftentimes it becomes a striking battle, which could potentially happen on Saturday, and that's what happened in the Dern and Vanderaa fight. But man, Dern, does she have the wrestling of, let's say, Carla Esparza? Maybe not. Does she need it? I don't think so, man. I've seen Randa Marcos, I've seen Amanda Hebus and Cynthia Calvillo get this girl down, and Mackenzie Dern is just levels above all of those girls I just mentioned on the mat. I think once she gets it down, she finds to finish that round, man.
Yeah, man. So honestly, this wouldn't be my first choice to headline a card, but I do think that it's an excellent matchup. Like you said, it's a classic striker versus grappler here, and I love that we're backing the grappler. We like to back her any chance that we could get, but like you said, this seems like a tailor-made matchup for Mackenzie Dern here. Rodriguez kind of notorious for having lackluster takedown defense,
for sure.
And to be honest with you, whenever the fight does get to the ground, holding on for dear life and hoping that the ref stands you up against somebody like Mackenzie Dern isn't an option. Mackenzie Dern's going to be slicing through you like
one
butter.
Pass, that's all we need.
Yeah, man, and it's going to happen quickly. Mackenzie Dern isn't one to waste time, and she doesn't have to be patient on the ground because she's so high level. I would say that Mackenzie Dern's biggest test to date came in her last fight to Nina Nunez, where she absolutely rolled. I know a lot of people thought that Nina had the tools to kind of keep it standing, and they were dead wrong. And now we enter an octagon that's 25 foot. That's a smaller octagon. Rodriguez shown that takedown defense, and I honestly think that we'll see this go to the mat. I love the fight doesn't start round 4 prop, because let's say Dern can't get it to the mat in the first 2 rounds. I would bet that it takes about 2 rounds for Marina Rodriguez to find success on the feet. If you were to ask my dad, the fact that we're betting against Marina Rodriguez after what she did to Amanda Ribas, he would say that we're a little crazy here. I do think that she is high level when it comes to striking. And against most other girls in the 115-pound division, I think Marina Rodriguez would whoop their ass. Yeah. I just think that Mackenzie Dern is the future. I think that she has the best base in women's MMA right now.
So many women's MMA fights end up on the mat.
Right. The only girl that I would that I'd be looking to fade Mackenzie Dern against, just off the top of my head, is Tatiana Suarez. Yeah. Outside of that, I think that Dern has the advantage over anybody when it comes to the mat, and I'm happy that we're backing her. I also love that we have that small hedge, that it doesn't see that 4th round, because, like I said, Rodriguez could find that success, but I think that we made the best play possible.
I don't think it's long before Mackenzie Dern finds a takedown either. Like you said, it's a smaller octagon, but Marina loves that tie clinch of hers, and I do think if she is able, it's it's just instinct to her to grab it, and if she does, it's going to be a simple little trip behind with Dern's right leg, put her right down on the mat.
Mm-hmm.
Man, yeah, Mackenzie Dern, I feel like, has 5 rounds to when you're going to sub this girl, man,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty crazy to think that if Mackenzie Dern gets through this, she's got Rose and Zhang Wei Li and Joanna waiting on her. It's just crazy to think the girls who have just been leading the way for flyweights. Mackenzie's one fight from fighting those girls, and it's awesome to see. Very good looking, awesome to see in the octagon, and
check our tweet.
Absolutely, glad to back her. Yeah, nothing else really to say, man. Mackenzie's level above with this girl on the mat. Marina's levels above this girl on the feet, and it's just going to be whoever can get their game going. And historically, it's usually the grappler, man. I appreciate you guys tuning in on a relatively mediocre card here. Only 10 fights now. It's not too not too long of a podcast. We're going to make the challenge now on the co-main event there between Randy Brown and Jared Gooden. Expecting big fireworks, and going to lead that off as my fight of the night that I think people need to be watching, man.
Nice. I think that also will be a fucking barn burner for as long as it lasts. My fight of the night has to be Deron Winn versus Phil Hawes. I think that, like you said, those are 2 grapplers. We'll probably get a striking battle, and neither of those guys have the most technical striking, so it might be a shit show.
For my fighter to watch, I'm going to go with Mackenzie Dern, not only just because we're backing her and stuff, but she is... like you said, it potentially could be tailor-made as she's got a girl who just has shown lackluster defense. She's in her first main event spot.
And a smaller octagon.
On a smaller octagon. Yeah, she's in a good spot, like I said. There's only huge fights for Dern if she wins this one. How about yourself?
My fighter to watch has to be Agapova here, man. She's coming off that huge upset loss, and she's got something to prove here. This would be a huge bounce-back win for her, and she'd probably get that hype. Maybe not as much hype, but gain that hype back as she moves forward.
For sure. What about your best underdog?
My best underdog is going to be my casual cap, Jared Gooden. Like I said, I don't think that there's many dogs on this card, but for what it's worth, I think that one's lined pretty inappropriately.
So mine was going to be my casual cap, and I was going to take Jamie Pickett. So, man, if I've got to go down through
Lucky
there,
you.
if I've got to go down there and pick one just right off, off the top of the head, I'm going to go Charles Rosa. He opened as a minus 180. I can snag him as a plus 155, an underdog. So I'll go with an underdog pick as Charles Rosa.
Didn't know about that opening line. Yeah, it's interesting.
My best bet, I think Loopy's a good bet. I really do.
She is.
She's beaten Sam Hughes as an amateur. They went 5 rounds in a technical draw. Yeah, I really like Loopy here. I don't think Sam Hughes will be able to replicate anything just Panay did, and at range, man, Loopy's going to light this girl up.
Absolutely love that pick. My best bet is going to have to be Matheus Nicolau, man. Honestly, he is better everywhere when it comes to his matchup against Tim Elliott. I think that defensively, he's one of the most sound fighters ever, and if Elliott can't overwhelm you with his pressure, he'll get outclassed on the feet. So I can expect the Nicolau by decision, but it's only sitting at plus 120, so I'd be much more confident in just laying the hammer on his money line or adding him to a parlay like we've done in our podcast.
I'm with you, man. We're gonna start something new where we like to also give out a prop bet that we really like. And I told you guys earlier, I think Deron Winn only wins this fight with this wrestling and by decision to sit at plus 450, implying only 18% of the time. I think it's much closer to a 30 to a 35% time that Deron Winn can wrestle his way to a decision if his wrestling is as high level as DC talks about and stuff. So Deron Winn by decision plus 450 is definitely a little wide.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. I think my best prop bet is going to be Agapova Mazo doesn't start round 2. That's sitting at plus 390, which is like a 23% chance that it happens. I think Agapova, wins the fight in the first round at a 30% clip. Now you add that I get Mazo in that as well if Agapova gasses like she did against Shayna Dobson. I know it's a girl fight, but at plus 390, I think that there's some value there at doesn't start round 2.
I don't hate it, man. We've already released a couple bets on Twitter and at the beginning of the podcast as well, so make sure you get on those before the line gets out of whack there. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you next week, and let us know in the comments who you have in the main event.
Peace.